There's so many different methods and ways to build a cabinet. There's no right and wrong way. As you can see here, I'm marking out, I'm using glue, I'm using brad nails and screws. You could use dominoes, you could use biscuits, dowels, flat pack connectors, you could cut housing joints, or as you call them in America, dados. There's so many different ways to do it. This is my preferred way on a small, simple cabinet build like this. There's no need for any fancy joinery. Once you glue and screw this together, it's going to be solid as a rock. I just use the brad nails just to pin things together while I get clamps on, and just stops anything sliding around. That way everything stays nice and square and accurate. As you can see, I use a T-square to mark a nice straight line where I want the screws to go in, just so they go into the centre of each piece of wood. I don't want any of this MDF splitting, and I carry on that process throughout the rest of the cabinet build. Super simple, super effective, no need for anything else. Using simple joinery methods like this, it just allows you to concentrate on other things, like making sure the build is nice and square, making sure things are in alignment, giving you more freedom to think about the design rather than the joinery techniques. After we've assembled the cabinet, we add some shelf bin holes, and I'm just using a simple homemade jig here, which is just a piece of hard plastic with some 9mm MDF on there, screwed together, and then I've just put the holes in it myself, making sure to be relatively accurate when you put these holes in. And then, as you can see, I use a drill bit there just to secure it in position while I move it along and drill the next set of holes. Here I'm building some simple shelves out of 9mm MDF, and to glue the face frame on these shelves I'm using PVA glue and super glue and activator, and surprisingly this super glue is a lot stronger than the PVA glue when used in conjunction with MDF, and if you try and pull these apart it just tears the MDF. I use the track saw to cut the back panel to size, and then I glue and nail this into position. Sometimes you'll find on larger panels that the MDF will bend a little bit, so here you can see Jacob just pushing it in while I brad nail the back into position. That'll hold everything nice and square, because the last thing you need is a bow on your cabinet when you come to make a door or a drawer. That's going to make things difficult later on in the build for you. On this cabinet I've decided to add a face frame, and there's a couple of reasons behind this. The first one being the door and the drawer are going to be inset, and I just don't think an 18mm face frame looks great, so I decided to double this to 36mm. That's generally what I do. If I was going to be doing overlay doors, then I'd just keep it at the 18mm, but it just looks better in my opinion when you've got an inset door, that you've got a wider face frame. It also gives me better purchase to put the screws into when I hang the door on for the hinges. Because we use screws and brad nails to put the cabinet together, we've got a little bit of extra filling to do, and we'd have filling to do anywhere around the face frame, any imperfections on the MDF or all like that. Because we're painting this cabinet, we need to have a really good prepared surface ready to paint, and then obviously we're going to give this a good sand down as well. Next I attached two 18mm packers either side of the cabinet, just to bring the wall of the cabinet out to the same depth as the face frame to attach the drawer runners onto. In the next few clips you're going to see me make some shaker style doors, and I've already done a full video tutorial on how to do these recently, so I'll just leave a link to that video in the description below, and I'll just let this part of the video play out. If you're interested in any of the tools I use or the consumables, things such as the table saw, the miter saw, or even smaller things like this featherboard here on the table saw that I'm using, everything can be found on my website carlwoodcraft.co.uk, and I'll leave a link to that in the description as well. That's just one of the ways you can support the channel. You can also support the channel on Patreon and on channel membership and super thanks as well. I'm now moving on to the drawer, and here you can see I'm just measuring how far the drawer front needs to go, and then that's where I'm going to be placing the front of the drawer runners. I like to put the drawer runners in first, and then cut the components for the drawer over at the table saw and the miter saw. I like to do the side pieces first, and then I can put the front and back piece into position and measure the exact width. I then do a test fit and just make sure this fits nice and smoothly, and it's best to oversize this and then just reduce it slightly until you've got a perfect fit. The drawer components get put together really simply with glue and with brad nails. I also use some corner clamps just to make sure that the drawer is perfectly square, because the last thing you want is a drawer that is out of square to make your life difficult later on in the build. And because I'm very confident that the drawer is nice and square, because I'm using these corner clamps, I can use the drawer body to draw around onto this hardboard here for the bottom of the drawer. And then I can cut this out on the table saw and at the miter saw, and then just glue and brad nail this into position. Again, filling any holes with wood filler left behind by the brads, and then it's time to insert the drawer. I'm just using a bit of the offcut from the 4mm hardboard as a packet to put underneath the drawer. Make sure the drawer is nice and flush with the front of the runners, and then just screw one screw in at a time, pulling it out a little bit at a time until you've got all the screws all the way along the side of the drawer. Then on to attaching the drawer front. I've got a really nice gap around the drawer, probably be about 1mm, really nice fitting. I use a couple of cards at the bottom just to space it out right, and then fire some brad nails in, and then I can pop some screws in from behind later. Then I need to find the centre of the drawer, and I do that just by marking from one corner to the other corner and then placing a screw in there so I can just pull the drawer back open until later on when I fit the handle. It's then time to add the hinges onto the door, and I use a combination square to get a consistent measurement from both sides of the door. I simply draw around the butt hinge and then chisel this out to rebate it into the door. As you can see, I put a pine trim around the door as well, and this is just to make painting a little bit easier later on, as painting the MDF it does require a little bit more effort, and I just thought, why not add a wooden trim around just to make this a little bit easier later. Here you can see me just adding a chamfer to the inside and the outside edge of the top of the cabinet. I then soften all the edges with some sandpaper and prep everything ready for painting. The cabinet gets painted with 4 coats of this silk emulsion. Denibbing in between coats, making sure the MDF end grain is sealed really nice and well, and making sure just to pay a bit more attention to any end grain. I then move on to fitting the hardware, and I fit a magnet to the top of the cabinet door. The next thing I did was tile the top of the cabinet, so this was down to the client's choice. They wanted to add these matching tiles to their deco on top of the cabinet, and I was a bit wary about doing this at first. I thought it'd look a little bit old-fashioned, but obviously what the client wants, the client gets. But it actually grew on me. Anyway, the way I did this was I stuck the tiles on with some no more nails, and then I used these window packers just to space them out nice and evenly, and then I left it for 24 hours, and then I came back and added some light grey grout in between the tiles, and I think it looked great in the end, and the client likes the way it looks, so that's all that matters. I've only ever done any tiling once, and that was a long time ago. So this was something a bit new for me anyway, so that was also something good. I enjoyed doing it, and all I did is I made the grout and I just pushed it into the joints, and then I cleaned it off with a sponge and some clean water, any excess. And it was as simple as that. Left it, it dried really well. It says on the packet that it's flexible, so we shouldn't have any problems, and I've moved it around since then and nothing's cracked, so job's a good one. Closing in on the end of the project now, and we're just adding the last few bits of hardware. I had these chrome feet ordered from Amazon, what the client wanted, and these are adjustable as well, probably give you about 5mm of adjustment. And yeah, just attach these to the bottom of the cabinet, really simple, and they just screw onto the base plate. It's then a simple case of just adding the final touches, adding the handles, again, what the client chose, reattaching the magnets, because we had to take these off when we painted, and that's it, the job's complete. Give everything a check over, make sure there's nothing scratched, touched anything up, and ready to pass on to the client. Super duper. That's the cabinet totally finished now then, guys. I'm really happy how it's turned out. You may notice I've changed these handles from the crystal ones to these more traditional ones, and I think these match the tiles a lot better. In total, it took about 2 days from start to finish to build the cabinet. A lot of that was painting time, waiting in between coats, denibbing and things like that. But what we'll do now is we'll get some beauty shots. And if you like the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. If you'd like to support us, you can do that through Patreon and channel membership. And if you've got any comments, just ask away and I'll do my best to answer it. I'll see you on the next one, guys. Bye.